Hello, Miriam.
Hello, Natalie. Natalie Miriam, actually.
Yes, yes, yes. That's what we're going to talk about today. This is our big announcement today. I mean, not such a big announcement, but we'll talk about that. I'm so happy to have you, Miriam. This is the second time that I'm interviewing you.
Thank you.
It's actually following a tradition that we have at the Jewish Women Entrepreneurs Podcast, is that we do speak about women, we do speak about business, we do speak about leadership. But before the big holidays, we like to dive in a little bit more into the spiritual meaning of each holiday. And as everyone knows, we're a week away from Passover. And so I'm so happy to welcome you back so that we can talk a little bit more about this holiday, the meaning of it, and we have amazing questions for you, and I'm sure you have amazing answers for us. So we can start putting ourselves into the spirit and the atmosphere of Pesach. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
So I will start by first sharing with everyone your bio, because not everyone knows you yet. I always say yet because I'm sure that you'll become very famous one day. And then we'll dive right in the questions that we have for you on Passover. So Myriam Ackerman Sommer was born and raised in southern France. At the age of 20, she met and married Igel Hazard, whom I know, by the way. You can send him my regards. And they decided
He's
to become...
babysitting.
He's babysitting, of course he is. Of course he is. And they decided to become Orthodox rabbis together. It is their dream to create an inclusive Jewish community in Paris. Myriam is an alumna of the École Normale Supérieure of Paris and a student at Yeshivat Maharat in New York City and the Sorbonne. She is currently working on a PhD in Jewish American literature. Myriam also created the first daily Talmud podcast in France to be produced by a woman. 500 plus, very impressive episodes so far, and co-created with Tali Treves the intensive learning program for Jewish women, Kol El, to democratize the access of half of our community to the texts that have shaped their heritage. I love it. I love everything about this. Everything about it. Yes, of course. It's amazing to have this podcast, to build this community, to be rabbis together with your husband. I think this is, it's amazing. So today we're here to talk about Passover. We'll just say once, Passover is Pesach, Pesach is Passover. So we'll just use either or for people who don't know it. And we have a few questions, and of course, we're going to look at Pesach from the angle of women. That's what we like to look at. We like to look at what were the roles of women for this, in the story, in the original story in Egypt that we're celebrating in Pesach. And more specifically, that's what I told you when I contacted you. I said, I want to talk about this sentence that everyone says around Pesach. It is through the merit of women that we have been able to leave Egypt. I know I've heard this sentence many times, and I would love to dive in this and to know, where is it from? What does it mean? For you to tell us everything you know about that.
Thank you so much. So you won't be surprised to learn that it's actually from the Talmud. Tractate Sota 11b, Darish Rabbi Avira. It's a teaching from Rabbi Avira. Bischar Nashim Tzadkaniyot. It's through the merit of the righteous women. Shehayu be'oto hador, that exist in that generation, the generation of Yetziat Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt. Nigalu Israel. All of Israel was redeemed and was basically freed by Mitzrayim from Egypt. And what's interesting is that the Malbim, so one of the commentators on the Torah, was more specific by saying Shenashei Hador Hahu Haya Lahem Sechut Yoter Min Hanashim. Actually, the women had more merit than the men, because it's so interesting that I'm developing this concept in your program about Jewish women entrepreneurs, because basically what these women were was pretty much related to being an entrepreneur. That is to say, they had the motivation when nobody else did. They had the hope and the foresight that things would go the way they wanted things to go. And that's exactly what the whole story is about. There's an interesting element about Pesach. It's that women and men are obligated to do the exact same thing. So women and men do the four cups, the agada, and all of that. We have the same level of obligation. And interestingly, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says it's because Afen Hayu Beoto Hanes. They also participated in the miracle, right? And Rashi, the commentator, says not only they also participated in the commentary, but it's thanks to them that it happened. And you know what, says Rashi, it's not the only time. Actually, the Megillah, it's the same. Esther and Vashti, because we were saved because thanks to a Jewish woman. And also, you know what? V'chen gabei ner Chanukah. And also, Chanukah, we were saved thanks to a woman whose name was Yehudit, Judith, who killed the general of the army of our enemies. So basically, in these two instances, Purim and Chanukah, the miracle happens through a woman. What's so specific about Pesach is that it's Nashim Tzedkaniyot. It's like the entire people. They had the will to move on and to live on when the men had stopped hoping. The men, it is said in the Talmud, no longer wanted to have children. They decided that life in Egypt was much too hard. So they couldn't just keep up with all of that, and they didn't want their children to live through this. And sometimes I've heard, actually, mostly my non-Jewish friends actually, but say, we don't want to have children because this world is too hard. And oftentimes the Jewish soul says, actually, no, we are going to make this world better. Well, we need to have children. We need to have children now, and this is our future. And this is exactly what the women do. And actually, we're taught through a very interesting midrash in Tractate Sota 11b that they were the ones seducing their husbands. So that there was a whole ritual of seduction through which the men didn't want to have children. So the women would kind of pamper their husbands so that they would be interested in having sexual relationships. And of course, contraception at the time didn't exist. So basically, the men either didn't have sex with their wives and didn't have children, or they did have sex and then they did have children. And so the wives would convince them to have sex with them. And that's how the merit of the women starts unfolding. It's through these acts of seduction through which the women would basically seduce their husbands over and over again so that they would have boys and girls. And there's an interesting scene with Miriam, the prophetess, right, in the Midrash. So in the exegesis on the Torah, it is mentioned that Miriam's father, Levi, also decided that he wouldn't have any more children. He had two, Aaron and Miriam. He was like, no more children. And also there was a decree from Pharaoh that said that if the women had boys, the boys would be killed. And Levi said, okay, I'm not having any more babies. And Miriam told him, well, by doing that, you are preventing the baby girls from being born as well. So you're being more cruel than Pharaoh. And actually, Levi and Yocheved were reunited, and they had Moshe. So that is presented in Tractate Megillah this time. It's presented as something that was mostly due to Miriam. Miriam, the prophetess, foresaw that her parents would beget Moshe, and that Moshe could save the people. If she hadn't convinced her parents, then Moshe wouldn't have been born in the first place. So there's this idea that they were able to foretell things that were to happen through sheer hope and determination.
Wow. So I love what you're saying, because it really is reminding me, we had an episode on Purim, on Megillat Esther, with our guest. And we spoke, of course, about Esther and about the way that she used her leadership power. And we compared also her with Vashti, what was the different way of Esther and Vashti to be more to be a different type of leaders. And now you're like confirming what we said, because you're saying basically the women, they did save the people, but they did it in a feminine way. They did it from, from not like, I would say a masculine leadership that, is seen from everyone, and everyone sees them, and there's power and there's ego, and there is, this whole, which there's nothing wrong with ego and power. We need it also for leadership, right? But you're saying here that they were doing things maybe behind the curtains. They were seducing their husbands. They were seducing, they were doing things that people maybe did not see. But then what I like about this is that in the Talmud, we are saying this. Some people are saying, yes, even if you didn't see it, even if it was behind the curtains and it was only in the intimacy of the husband and wife, it's still something that is recognized. So can you also maybe explain, like, how is it that it's recognized? Like, what is this choice all of a sudden to say something about this leadership that is behind the curtain? Or is it like a coincidence that the Chachamim are talking about this? Like, how did they know? First of all, how did they know that it was so like this in the intimacy of their house?
So it's very interesting. The representation of the Chachamim is that most women acted through basically agency on their sex life and reproduction. And what's interesting is that it's not always behind the curtain, because you have the example of the midwives. The example of the midwives is very much public, right? The scene where, so in the beginning of Shemot, we know that these two midwives called Shifra and Puah rebel against the Pharaoh, rebel against Pharaoh. So that would be Shemot around 115, right? That Melech Mitzrayim, he says to the king of Egypt, says to the Miyaldot Ha'ivriot, he goes to the Hebrew midwives, and he says, you know what, don't let the baby boys live, you can let the baby girls live. And of course, you know what's going to happen. The midwives are going to do what will then be qualified as an act of civic disobedience, because they will basically let the boys live and then find out some excuse. Oh, but the Jewish women are too healthy and sturdy, and when we arrive in the birthing room, the boy is already born, and it's too late. We could not kill the boys. But basically, this is an act of rebellion against the orders of Pharaoh, and you can imagine it is as though the tyrant at the time was ordering you to do something. It took some courage to say no, and still they said no and found excuses. It's interesting that, of course, Shifra and Puah are going to be reread through the Midrash as Yocheved, so Moshe's mother, and her daughter Miriam, who's defined as a Puah. And some say it was actually Yocheved and Elisheva, her daughter-in-law. Elisheva is my baby's name, which I chose mostly due to that story, because I find it's a really beautiful midrash. So why Shifra and Puah? Puah is referred to. I mean, this her name is used because it says that she helps the child basically cry forth. So Puah, as in when the child exits from the womb, she helps it cry out. And also Puah is linked to Ruach HaKodesh. Shehaita Puah beRuach HaKodesh. She would have this sense of divine inspiration, and again related to Miriam. Omeret Atida imi sheteled ben shemoshia et Israel. She would say, in the future, my mother is going to give birth to a child, and this child will save the entire Jewish people. So she had the confidence. Again, confidence is a key word when we're trying to think about the leadership of these women. Confidence in public and in private. Confidence that they can seduce their husbands who don't really want to have anything to do with them. Not that they're no longer attracted to them, it's just that they're completely distraught and have lost all sense of hope and trust in the future. So they have hope for their couple, for their love life, and also they have hope in the future, in the redemption of the entire people. It is also mentioned that Puah would actually bring babies back to life. שהייתה מפיע את התינוק כשהיו אומרים מת. When people said, oh, the baby's dead, she would actually do some kind of like reanimation on the baby, which is very modern for us. And she would make it, she would reveal God to the Jewish people. That she would reveal the presence of God to Israel, to the entire people, but also, and the last etymology is that she was Hofia Panim Keneged Paro. She was she showed insolence towards Pharaoh. She had no respect for the tyrant, and she said, woe unto you who are doing this to the Jewish women. You're going to be punished for your actions. And saying that to a tyrant is almost unimaginable. So having the bravery of saying, no, these things cannot continue. This is what women's leadership in Egypt also looked like. It was not only behind the curtains. Part of it was very much active in public leadership and speaking truth to power.
Wow, I love that. Thank you for, because I was under the impression that everything was, in the intimacy of their homes, but here you're really showing how they had the courage to really speak out and be strong in their rebellion, and that makes so much sense. Now, we started this podcast by saying there was an announcement. I told you just before we went on that my Hebrew name was Miriam. Your Hebrew name is Myriam, as we can see in the podcast, and we're talking about Miriam, the prophetess. So when I said that, you say, oh, I have tons of things to say about Miriam, and I know Miriam is one of my very, very dear character in the Bible, in the Torah. So what can you say about Miriam? Because we spoke about it a little bit, about how she helps her father and mother to, convince them to basically have more children, and that's how Moshe is born. But I would love for you to tell us, more about this amazing character.
Miriam is amazing from beginning to end. We know that even before Moshe was born, in the Midrash, she would help her mother as a midwife, and she was giving birth to so many babies and actually bringing them back to life. And it's also known in Tractate Megillah, she's presented as one of the 7 Jewish women who are prophetesses. So she really had this idea of foresight and prophecy that she shared with some of the matriarchs, for instance. So I think what's really interesting about her is that she doesn't lose faith even in the face of the worst obstacles. So she says, she has this prophecy. She tells her father that he is going to give birth to Moshe, and then when Moshe is born, the light fills the room, and Levi feels something and kisses his daughter and says that actually maybe your prophecy may be fulfilled. But then there's another decree of Pharaoh that all the boys need to be all the baby boys need to be actively killed. And he basically slaps his daughter Miriam and says, so what now? What about your prophecy? And she's like, I still think it's going to be fulfilled, and that's why she follows, and that's actually mentioned in the pshat of the Torah, in the literal sense of the Torah. She follows the basket containing Moshe. She's like, I know he's not going to drown. I know for sure something's going to happen. I know for sure there's going to be a redemption. And then when you find her again, she's leading the women in song. So this is when they have already left Egypt. We have this passage a little bit later, so that would be in Vayishlach, when first of all, Moshe is singing the song of the sea to the men, and then Miriam is chanting the same song to the women, and she's mentioned that they have timbrels in their hands. And this is very curious, because the question is, how did they know that they were going to be saved in this instance? And how did they think about bringing timbrels? And actually, it's Rashi who brings up the idea that as opposed to men, women were quite sure that this was going to happen. So they trusted God to save them, and therefore they had brought the instruments that would enable them to sing for God when the prophecy would be fulfilled. So Miriam keeps trusting and then leads the women in song. This would seem to parallel your assumption about men's leadership and women's leadership being parallel, but parallel as like the songs are parallel, but at the same time there's something different about the song of the women. There are dances and the timbrel is being played, so something specific maybe about women taking up this role of leadership. And again, the idea that it is the women who knew for sure that they were going to need the timbrels, because there was going to be some celebration and because they were going to be saved once more.
Right, and we can also hear the intuition, right? The intuitive dimension that we very often connect to feminine, feminine intuition. But here it's more than intuition, right? They see something before, they believe in it so much that they take action. It's not just I have a feeling, I have an intuition, but it really is translated into, just like you said in the beginning, comparing to entrepreneurs, right? You have people that have dreams and people that have intuitions or ideas, and you have entrepreneurs that actually take those ideas and dreams and intuitions and make something out of it. So I think we can really relate to that in the Jewish Women Entrepreneurs podcast. That really makes sense. There's another thing that you told me also before. You said that not only it's because of the women that we were saved from Egypt, but it's also in the desert. It also the women also helped the Jewish people stay true to these values. Can you tell us more about this journey throughout the desert?
Exactly. Thank you. Another important passage of the Midrash from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 45:4 brings up the Igel Hazard, right? So one of the worst mistakes we've made in the desert is related to the golden calf. And it's very interesting that in the Torah itself, Aaron is trying to stall by asking the men to bring jewels from the wives, and so he says, "Bring me their earrings, bring me whatever gold they have," and basically the men take it from their wives by force. And they were unwilling to give their earrings to their husbands, because they realized that something was wrong with the Igel Hazahav. So they did not want to participate, and they did not participate willingly at all. It is mentioned Shema'u Hanashim, that the women were forced. Velo kiblu aleihem liten nizmehen lebalehen, and they did not accept to give their earrings to their husbands. Ela amru lahem, they would tell them, atem rotzim la'asot shekutz v'toeva, you want to do something that is disgusting and abominable, she'ein bo koach lehatzil, that cannot save you. It's just idolatry, right? It cannot save you. So it says that the reward for the women, because they did not participate, because they stayed true to Hashem, and they did not verse into idolatry, their reward was basically Rosh Chodesh. That Rosh Chodesh is supposed to be a holiday when the women, it's also related to the cycles of the moon, so it has something to do with women's periods as well. It's when they're not supposed to work. Shehen mashmerot choshe chodashim, that they are renewed like the new moon as well. So Titchadesh, it is mentioned that they are renewed through Rosh Chodesh, right? The new month is given to them to rest and to relive this experience of being able to say no. And again, it's the women as a collective, like the women as a whole, they all say no together to the men who come to get their gold, their earrings, and it's not that they don't want to give their jewels, because when Moshe again comes back and asks, it's Shemot 38, he asks for everything that people can bring, and the women bring basically their mirrors, to create a washstand of copper with its base made of copper. They bring copper mirrors, and it says that it's like the women asher tzavu, like hatzovot asher tzavu. They were whole legions of women. It's interesting because it's almost like an army of women showed up to give to the Beit Hamikdash, to create our holy sanctuary. So when it was for a good cause, they knew how to give. Like, if you really wanted to see something negative in this, you would say, of course they didn't give their gold earrings because they wanted to keep their jewels. No, not at all. When it was worth it, they would participate, and they all came and they all gave. And what's interesting is that Rashi brings up another midrash that says, like, God wasn't Moshe wasn't so sure that he should accept the mirrors, because he was like, okay, maybe it's used for like women to cater to their yetzer hara, like it's an evil impulse because they look at themselves in the mirror. Is that really proper for the mishkan, for the sanctuary? And God Hashem said, actually, I love these mirrors more than everything, because when they were in Egypt, they would use the mirrors to seduce their husbands. They would be like pampering themselves and saying to their husbands, like, look at me, do you think I look beautiful? And this would lead the men to have more babies with these women. So I love the mirrors more than everything. And that's again so interesting. It's through what makes women women that they participate, but as they participate, they're compared to an army. So there's feminine imagery and there's very masculine imagery, and the conjunction of both is extremely interesting.
Very interesting. Very. I love that. I love that we're looking at all those elements, and there's so many feminine aspect in the story, but at the end, it's so powerful, and it's a collective. And like you said, it's like a, they use the word of army and of force. At the end, there is something very, very powerful, but it's still very aligned to that feminine dimension that we associate with women. So that's really interesting, and I think that's a great transition to our last question, because I think this question is even a bigger question that sees the whole aspect of the Jewish identity. That how are women either responsible or really how are they really holding the Jewish identity? How is the Jewish identity? Can we say that it's really depending on women? What is in their commitment? What is connected between women, Jewish women, and the Jewish identity? How can you make that connection?
Well, in halachic times, it would be very simple to answer your question by saying that Jewishness comes from the mother, but I think there's something deeper to it. And I think it has to do with the fact that it is the commitment of the women of Egypt, that generation of Egypt, that we are supposed and encouraged to mirror. Again, it's interesting because the mirrors is what we gave as women to create the Mishkan, to create a space of holiness. So I think that this is really encouraging us to participate with everything that we are, with all our strength, to the continuation of the Jewish people. It's not only about like having kids and then it's over. It's really al titosh mecha. There's something we say every day, right? In our prayers. Don't forget everything, the Torah of your mother, the teaching of your mother. Don't forget what your mother taught you. And again, every Friday night, there's the singing of Eshet Chayil, right? The woman of valor. And what does it say? That Torah Chesed al Lishona. There is a teaching of wisdom on her lips, right? And very much the Eshet Chayil, I could spend a whole session dealing with that, but she's the Jewish woman entrepreneur before it was hype.
Right.
So because she does it all, like she runs the family, but then she purchases without the consent of her husband. Her husband is known as the husband of, and she's not the wife of, he's the husband of. And everybody talks about her at the gate of the city. She is waiting for basically like she brings a lot of produce from far away. Like she really like runs her business basically. And it is said that, but she's not only like a very practical woman, right? She also has a Torah Chesed al Shona. She has a teaching to share, and this teaching is very much grounded in the Jewish identity that we want to give to our children, and things to transmission. So I think that the model we have managed to gain from today's study together has to do with this idea that first of all, we had the motivation, we had the courage, and we had the hope when all the men had lost it, and now this is a difficult world, right? And I think it's easy to lose hope once more, and that Jewish women need to carry a teaching of hope in the future, and of hope in our Jewish values, and that they can triumph in this society we live in.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. I know I said it was the last question, but I do want to ask you one more question, Myriam. We speak about teaching of women. We speak about Torah Timecha. The mother is teaching to their children, and of course, this is what you just said, and it resonates. However, I cannot help but see even from your bio how you are promoting inclusive teaching, learning, how you're including women in your learning in everything that you do. And I want to ask you, do you feel that we are finally getting to a place where there is equality in the way men are learning Torah and women are learning Torah? And if there's no equality, do you think that, what do you think should be done to reach that? Because there's still differences.
Not yet, but we'll get there. Meaning that I will say that we've reached equality when I can walk into a Beit Midrash. A place where I can find all the books from my tradition and find women on the shelves. And that's, yeah, I mean, as of today, it's still hard to achieve. I am looking forward to women publishing their own commentaries on the Talmud, on Midrash, on Halacha, and that's a lot. And I think we can do it. And this is the generation when we're going to be able to do it. And if it's not us, it will be our daughters. So it's obviously happening. And I think that the Torah that women were sharing for generations and generations was more informal. It wasn't necessarily grounded in text, but it was grounded in feeling and experience. And now we can take this feeling and experience back into the text. And this is going to definitely shed light on our traditional texts. And this way, I really believe in the voice of women and making sure that it is heard, and making sure that these voices get basically recorded in writing. So I really believe in this revolution. I do acknowledge that it will take time, but it's underway.
Great. We're with you on this revolution. We're following
Thank you so much.
We love it. And we think that, yes, with people like you, we're really in the right direction, because everything that you're teaching and we can feel how you're living through, it's really part of you. And it's not just something that you learned. It's really amazing to feel the excitement and the emotion around everything you're sharing. So thank you so much, Myriam, for sharing your wisdom with us and your knowledge. I definitely feel that this is the kind of preparation that I want to do. We speak a lot about cleaning and
I don't even think I'm going to do much cleaning myself. Like we're going to call someone to help us.
Exactly. That's what I love. I love that, we don't speak about, of course, if you want to clean your house,
yeah,
of course.
Sure.
But that's what I love about, getting ready for Pesach, for Passover, more on the spiritual level, and learning more about what happened, how those women are really role models for us, just like you said, as entrepreneurs, but also as women in our traditions, in our culture, in our identity, in our religion, in our spiritual life. And I think that this is a great way to start the week just before Pesach. And I will think about and I will even share what we said at the Seder table, because I think that there's a lot of knowledge, and I hope that a lot of people will use what we spoke about today to share it at their Seder table on Friday night. So thank you so much, Myriam. Pesach Kasher v'Sameach. Have a great Pesach.
To all of you, and thank you for listening.
And we will post, I'm not forgetting that we will post a link to Myriam's podcast. She did go beyond 500 episodes, which is amazing.
There's one episode every day, and it's been
one episode every day. Wow, amazing. So we will post the link of the podcast. If you're French speaking and you want to check it out, you're welcome to do so. Thank you so much, Myriam. Chag Sameach to everyone. And we will see you after Pesach for another episode of the Jewish Women Entrepreneur. Thank you.